Hi, this is BlueFriend. I've just finished recording The Dead Have Never Died by Randall, and I'd like to say this book, and chapters 16 and 17 particularly, truly resonated with me because of an experience in my earlier years, which I'd like to share with you. I'm not suggesting here that I momentarily died, but nevertheless I was shown that we do not die. Randall states that upon the act of death or dissolution, we simply close our eyes to this physical world, then reopen them again and find ourselves in a non-physical or etheric world, and that our identity, our personality, our thoughts, our feelings, our attitudes, and all that we held in our mind here is fully intact there, that nothing has changed except our actual body, which has become less dense, lighter, or ethereal, if you will, other than the body changing its density or vibratory frequency. Everything else about ourselves remains exactly the same. So, sharing my first of two experiences I had with you, while in the Canadian Air Force, during my 4th year, while posted at CFB Trenton, Ontario, this event occurred. It was totally spontaneous, involuntary. I was wide awake and in perfect health. The BOR I refer to below is the main office of all the administration for military personnel, and this is where this event happened. So here's my journal entry that I wrote 3 days after this occurred. Working in the Trenton Base Orderly Room, BOR, at the counter, filling out hospitalization forms for a member who had just been posted in from overseas. While standing at the counter, writing, I suddenly saw on the left side of me, about 18 inches away, at the 10 o'clock position, a second me standing there. For want of a better way to say it, I was physically standing there in my uniform, writing, yet looking at myself. A second me, a copy of me looking at myself, in a grayed version of myself in uniform. I recall that I saw mostly the top half of myself. I do not recall seeing the full length of me, just from the hips up. I was absolutely stunned at seeing myself as a grayed version standing there, and then, suddenly, I was in my second self, the grayed version of me, and now I was looking back at the original physical me, still writing the member's information down. Everything from the vision of my second self looked normal and in full color, etc. I could also hear the conversations going on around me, and I could clearly see everyone in the office. While in this second body, I thought, if I'm here, how can I be there too? Suddenly, I heard a loud click noise in my ears, and I was back again in my original physical self. The member must have noticed something unusual because he asked me if I was okay, and I replied, certainly. But inside, I was just dumbstruck as to what had just happened. I've spent hours thinking about what happened, and I've concluded that somehow we can live in other dimensions or realms. We don't die at all, but somehow we get later versions of our bodies, and all of our thoughts and identity remain intact as ourselves in that next plane. And that's the end of my journal entry. Well, it took several days to process this experience before I could even accept that it had actually happened. While thinking about it non-stop, I noticed that the moment I became aware that a second self was there, my conscious awareness was suddenly in that second self. I was thinking, seeing, and hearing as I had always done, and was totally intact in every way in that second self. And then, the moment I realized I was in that second self, and that there were two of me, then my conscious awareness returned to my physical self, and the second ethereal body simply faded away. I was being shown that we are more than our physical bodies, as Robert Monroe, who wrote Journeys Out of the Body, often said. We can live in other planes or dimensions or worlds, and we are totally ourselves, intact in every way. We simply do not die. We are spirit or ethereal beings. Notice that while I could see and hear everything while in that second lighter body, that the service member standing on the other side of the counter directly across from me did not see me. One can imagine then that when a loved person passes over, he could very likely be there in the room with us, seeing and hearing us, though we cannot see him, and we're completely unaware of his presence. Without doubt, this was definitely the most pivotal moment of my life, and in fact, my walk through life has been largely extrasensory, or metaphysical, or mystical, or spiritual-based, whatever term you prefer. This out-of-body experience led me to read Dr. Rampa's books, and interestingly enough, Dr. Rampa taught about how to project yourself deliberately out of your body, but he never mentioned that this can happen spontaneously and while awake and alert. However, through the internet, I find that others have also experienced this. And what do I make of it all these years later? Well, I've come to understand that, for instance, we see an astronaut in his suit and we call him an astronaut, but he is not that suit. He's just a man inside that suit. Similarly, we are not the bodily suits we wear. We are spirit or ethereal beings inside the physical suit that we call a man or a woman or just a human being. I now know that we already are eternal and immortal beings. We're all wearing physical suits temporarily so that we can experience this level of existence. But we will eventually take off our suits and return home. I've also personally come to suspect that we take off this physical suit virtually every night as the body sleeps, much as that astronaut steps out of his gear at the end of his tour of duty. In the morning, we return and reanimate the body suit again. If this is the case, then going to sleep each night is nothing more than a voluntary act of leaving the physical suit temporarily, whereas in death we leave the physical suit permanently and return to who we really are. But these are just my thoughts. And lastly, my own experience mirrors Edward Randall's observations as outlined in The Dead Have Never Died. I notice too that he mentions that we are not alone, but that spirit friends or helpers are with us constantly. I've had a few of those experiences too, and if there's interest, I'm willing to share them. I hope you will enjoy Randall's book as much as I have. From beautiful BC to you, BlueFriend.